So good morning. Thank you for joining us, Peter.
Yeah, we
No
appreciate
problem. I'm really, I really am pleased to be coming to do this. Honestly,
So tell us a little bit about
yeah,
who
but-
you are, I think, to kickstart this off.
okay. So I've only had two jobs in my life, really. I left school and joined the military, and then I left the military and joined the police.
What
Okay.
did you do in the military?
I was in what was known at the time Royal Army Ordnance Corps,
Uh-huh.
which became, after I left, became the Royal Logistic Corps. So my role in there was as a ammunition technician.
Oh wow!
So two aspects to that role. The first one is working in laboratories or ammunition storage areas, inspecting, repairing, and building
Yeah.
various types of ammunition, guided missiles, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The other aspect of that was EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. So that was terrorist bomb disposal.
Yeah.
So I worked in that arena for a bit, and that's where I was working when I left. And then joined the police. Worked predominantly in South Bristol.
Uh-huh.
So everybody who joins police starts on a response team, so they attend calls for burglaries.
Yeah.
And then I became what called a community policeman, but they're called beat managers now.
Uh-huh.
I did that for a few years. Then I went on to a proactive team, just targeting specific local problems within South Bristol, mainly in Hartcliffe, that sort of area. And then pretty much stayed on proactive or drug squads then for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
Uh,
You have got a slight tinge of a Bristol accent there.
yeah, I have.
Are you from that area, or
yeah,
is it just?
I was born in Bath.
Oh right.
And then lived in Consbury and then moved to Bristol. So
Yeah.
apart from 22 years in the army, I've spent most of my time in
Southwest.
Bristol or Somerset. Yeah.
Did you travel much with the army as well?
Yeah, I worked in Colchester. I worked in Holland.
Okay.
Wow.
I worked in Yorkshire, and then I worked in Warwickshire.
Oh, so you have travelled quite a bit.
Yeah,
really.
I did serve some time in the Falkland Islands and also in Northern Ireland.
Right.
So yeah.
I had a friend who was a bomb disposal. This is many years ago. And probably about 38 years ago, he was in bomb disposal, and his mum used to live locally. Yeah, and we were really good friends. And he used to, before we got in his car, he had to get a thingy and check underneath his car before we could get in it to go anywhere.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And he drove like an idiot, but other than that, he was absolutely a mad driver. But it was quite scary kind of stuff to be doing, really, when you're kind of dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there was certainly a precaution you take when you're in Northern Ireland, and yeah, it was always mindful around about that time. But it was a particular threat at the time. Fortunately, we don't have the same scenario
thank God
in Ireland, Northern Ireland, as we did then. So yeah, it's positive.
Well, I lived in London when it was all kicking off, so I was there at the Hyde Park. I was there at the underground bombings. I lived there then. It was quite scary. There's a lot of talk about PTSD from people who work in or who were in the forces.
Yeah.
Around that time, and obviously in other times when they've been to war in other areas. Is that something that you've identified with colleagues or friends, or indeed yourself?
I don't really feel that I've been affected, but the things that you're talking about, I'm not saying they haven't always been there, but they're modern things, aren't they? It's only things that we've really been concerned about in modern times. So I joined the army in 1981, and that probably was something you would have, if I was like suffering from PTSD for anything during the 80s or 90s, and I've been told to sort my life out, and get a grip, because it wasn't something that was recognised. So it's really hard. Yes, I've been through some periods of time where I haven't been as happy as I I would have wanted to be, you know. And
yeah.
so, was I depressed? Was I suffering from some sort of issue around PTSD or something that has affected me from things that I've done in my life? You know, being a cop is you see some bad things, you know, some real bad things. I saw I can't remember what it was now, in a paper or something, but in a career, a cop will see 600 really bad things, whereas normal people in normal lives will see six.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's a
so it,
huge
yeah,
difference.
yeah. So it's got to affect people. I know cops and I know soldiers that have suffered from PTSD and over specific incidents or prolonged exposure to certain things. So I know it happens, and I know people that have suffered from it. I know I have friends that have taken their own lives. You know, so I know all about that side of things. Do I think I suffer? No, I don't. I don't think I do. And I'll tell you why I don't think I do, because I've always had really good people around me,
Yeah.
and I think my wife, I can tell her anything. You know, sad as it may seem, but we work together, and we've done the same job for many years now. So you know, it's a lot easier for me and for her to be able to finish working and talk
Yeah,
to each
yeah,
other
yeah,
about
yeah.
things that have gone
Oh,
on,
yeah,
because
yeah.
we understand each other. So I think maybe that's sort of helped me.
It's quite a nice support mechanism, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you can sort of freely talk, and you've both experienced very similar things, so it makes it much easier to talk about how you
Well,
feel.
yeah,
it's strange you say that, because I'm in the same situation. So, you know, run a drug and alcohol rehab, and we work with some of very difficult people, as I'm sure you appreciate. And it can be very traumatic. Some of the stuff that we have to deal with is pretty not very pleasant, I should say.
yeah. Even just listen to people's
Yeah,
stories
listening to
is uncomfortable
yeah,
and emotional. Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes.
But I have, you know, Dave does. He's my partner, and it's our business, and we can go home and talk about it. And you know, sometimes we might be talking till 11 o'clock at night
Yeah,
because something is, and we still get hassled at 11 o'clock at night sometimes. So it's having that somebody to bounce off, isn't it? I think it's really important.
yeah. I think you're right. That's how I feel, that I'm okay with it. You know.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
Can I go back a step? Do you mind? It's that bit about, and I was thinking about it this morning. I was doing some reading and some meditation, and I was thinking about years and years ago, people kind of got depressed, but it kind of was dealt with in a very different manner, like you just suggested. If you were, you know, if you were struggling at work, whether you were in the army or the forces, whatever your circumstances were, it was, come on, boy, sort yourself out. Da, da, da. And I know that's a level it can be dismissed, but I wonder if you've got any ideas, either of you, about that bit. Why is it some people have got resilience to be able to manage that, and some people haven't? What is it about that? Just
do you know what, that is a really really good point. So a friend of mine took his own life probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, and you know, if you have a picture of someone, and he was not the person to do that.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, he was not the person to do that. And one of the things that sticks in my mind is that shouldn't have happened. It was over financial issues,
yeah.
but it should never have happened. But he just didn't have the ability to come to someone else and say, "Look, I
I
am in
struggle.
trouble here,"
Yeah,
you know. And any number of our group of friends would have given money to be able to sort this problem
yeah,
out,
yeah, yeah,
you know. And my yeah, and so you know, for that to happen, it took a long time for me to really appreciate how and why that happened and why he couldn't do it. And you know, and I'd think myself, you know, would I be able to go to someone with any issue? And I know that, you know, every time everybody in their life at some point has not got enough money to do what they want to do, you
yeah,
know. And I've been through that point myself, and it never really occurred to me that that was something that was so bad that, you know, I couldn't live with it as such. So it's really difficult. But you know, and I see now my daughter is in the military now, and uh, you she's in the Household Cavalry, so she's based at Knightsbridge in London. And you may well have seen in the papers recently, there was a young soldier from her barracks took his own life last week. Um, Another one took their own life around about 12 months ago, that soldier, my daughter knew really well. This soldier, she's not so well, but she has no idea whatsoever why this happened. No indication of any issues whatsoever. No way. But the organisation she works for are so supportive now to them all. And I don't think back when I was in the military that would have been the case. But they are really positive in trying to help everybody and
Yeah, yeah.
look after everybody and you know I know they're never going to find out why it happened, but what they can do. Invariably, it's not something to do with the general workplace as such. But yeah, it's really good to see that there are things in place. And yeah, I doubt very much in the 80s or 90s there was any mental health charities. But now we have plenty, don't we? So there's plenty of organisations. We could have more. The government could do more to fund more places, but that's another area of business. But
But is it like I absolutely concur with what you're saying. But is it the fact that it comes back to the government, or is it like if I need help, I pay for help? I'm fortunate that I can afford it. There's an expectation that the government will provide that. Is it that we talked about this the other day? Is it the fact that do the people that can afford it pay? I'm not saying that they can't use the NHS or they can't go through a government scheme of some kind, but the people that can afford to pay, pay. There's an expectation because the resource, I mean, we do it with the charity. You open the books and the books are full within 2 weeks. We've had 50 referrals in the last 2 weeks. You deal with that. We have to apply for money through grants and various other bits and pieces. We just don't get the money. Nothing comes in. We have to fight for that money. Nobody says, there you go, Somewhere House Somerset, there's £103,000 to keep you going for a year.
yeah,
Us as trustees have to earn that either through our pockets, because we donate, or we have to go out and do grants or fundraise, or people give their time freely, etc., etc. So is there a point where, coming back to your point about taking responsibility for yourself and doing something about your problem, your Sarge saying, "Oi, sort yourself out, boy," whatever, have we lost that ability as a country?
I appreciate what you're saying, and that mental health, to get help in relation to your mental health is hard for everybody. It's not an easy thing to do, and in anything in life now, even going to the dentist, we all have to pay to go to the dentist.
Yeah.
Do we go to dentists as often as we should do? I certainly don't. And so it's hurdles. If someone is
Yeah, yeah,
suffering
yeah,
any
yeah.
mental health issues, the last thing they need is a hurdle.
Yeah, yeah.
Between them and help.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, ultimately, the biggest hurdle is them realizing that they need some help.
Yeah, but that's just another one in the process, isn't it?
It
I
is,
need
and
help, but I've got to pay £100 an hour for a
that's
session.
it. But it's a case of who would you actually go to for that help?
Yeah.
You can go onto Google and you can Google for a counsellor or some mental health help, and you're probably going to come across something like 3 different options. One of those options is going to be go and see your doctor.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Another, and your doctor's going to be like, oh well, you've got an appointment in 3 weeks' time.
You wish.
If you're lucky. Another one is going to be, one of these online paid for counsellors that you can kind of book online, and another one is going to be a charity in your local area, like Somewhere House Somerset. But the reality is that even our waiting list, it can be a really long time. I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that there are people that have been on the waiting list for over 6 months. And that's simply because we do not have the resources to be able to see more people. We'd love to. But I think the reality is, the more money that we fundraise, the more counsellors we recruit, the more counselling sessions we offer. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where you can refer yourself and see somebody tomorrow, because I think all that will happen is that instead of people going to see their doctor, they would just go down a different path, a different route. And I wonder whether 20, 30 years ago, whether actually the sort of the statutory services like your doctor were better equipped
I
to
agree.
deal with this back then, or were they not? Was it just a case of, people just say, get on with it? I don't know.
Well, I worked for the mental health services, 30 or more years ago, for 15 years. Basically the procedure was you went to your doctor, they did what they could do. So they might give you an antidepressant, they might give you the counsellor that was at the GP surgery, which a lot of GP surgeries don't have counsellors anymore, but I don't know why. They save funding, but I know that money's there. And then if that didn't work, you then got referred to the mental health services, unless you were seen as somebody that was really, really unwell. So somebody that was indicating that they were at risk of committing suicide or psychotic or something like that. Then you'd get referred directly in. It would be classed as an urgent. On a Tuesday morning, the team used to sit down and go, this is an urgent, and allocate it to you or to me or whoever it was, and that they would do an assessment. And generally an assessment would have happened within a week to 2 weeks. But is that, they can't keep up with the volume of people. So is that back down to resilience? Is that back down to what you were saying, which is you're probably more accepting? If you have a bad day, you go and talk to your wife or whatever, or you're accepting that actually every day is not going to be a good day. But if people have a bad day and then another bad day and then another bad day, they then think that they're clinically depressed and that therefore they need help and therefore they need this and therefore they need that. And then before you know it, mental health services cannot cope, or indeed the local charities can't, or the Samaritans can't cope, or Childline can't cope, or Somerset can't cope. It happens. So is it that we've got less resilience, or is it, like you're saying, there's less resources?
So what you're saying there strays into my sort of area of business a bit there. Is that self-medication?
Yeah.
Right? So people, what you're describing, those services, people don't always have access to them. They don't want access to them. But during my business, I speak to a lot of people who are dependent on drugs, and they all have a story to tell. And it's invariably a mental health based story. So, the people that are using drugs that they become dependent on, so things like heroin, is because they are probably trying to forget something or to ease some pain, not just physical but mental pain about a subject. So that leads on to even a worst case scenario where someone's not only still depressed or still having issues mentally, but they're also got another problem in their life, which is dependent. So I think that if access was more available, then there would be less people suffering multiple issues like that. So whose fault is that? Not your fault, because you're trying to provide a service. It's funding. Funding's the issue. So whose responsibility is it? Is it the councils? Is it the NHS? Is it the government? The whole issue. Drug treatment nationally is an issue, and funding is being withdrawn all over the place. So it's
they've just put another massive pocket of money into it because they did the I can't say, Dame Edna's coming to my mind, but it's not that. It's
Carol Black.
Thank you, Dame Black or whatever her name is. She's done it, and then they've just decided to put a big wad of money into residential treatment because what they recognise is that people actually recover when they get residential treatment. They don't necessarily recover when they get community treatment because you can't actually get that person out and break those patterns. And so what they're saying is that money needs to be spent on residential treatment instead of being just pushed into community because it's the evidence is that it does not work as well.
I know what you're saying, and I'm a big fan of Carol Black, what she's done. I was fortunate enough to be invited by Carol to take part in the roundtable discussions around the initial concept of what she was asked to do and what she was going to produce for the government. And the work she's done is outstanding. It certainly maps the future of healthcare around drugs in the UK, and whether I'm right or wrong, the government have tasked her to do this, so they're obliged to take what she said, and they have done. So this is a really positive, not only around drug supply, but more importantly around drug treatment. That side of it. So,
but they've done a full circle, because when I first started in practice, this is what they were doing, and they used to allocate set money. It was ring fenced, and that money was ring fenced until a few years ago. And then they decided to not ring fence it. So local authorities no longer felt the need to ring fence that money to specifically target that area of challenges. So therefore, the people that are struggling with addiction, whether that's because they've had trauma in their life or not, whether it's a habitual habit or it's actually a trauma-based habit, that they were kind of almost forgotten about a little bit. So a lot of local authorities stopped doing residential treatment and only offered a community-based treatment, which 9 times out of 10, if you stand outside most community-based treatments, you can pick up every drug dealer that you like, because they all sit out there waiting for them to come out to give them so they can score. And it's, it's that pressure that puts somebody who's just spoken to their worker about they were sexually abused at the age of 5 or whatever, and they walk out the door and you're my drug dealer, if you see what I'm saying, and actually you're going to fix that feeling for me straight away like that. I don't need to look at that. And sadly, that's why community it does work for some. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's helpful. I mean, that's the thing about fellowships as well. Outside, if you stand outside a fellowship meeting to my knowledge, in this country, AA, NA, and you're a drug dealer, they'll have you. They won't put up with that. They don't tolerate people that do that. But they've got no power over when they're outside a community
people
drugs.
can stand what they want.
Yeah, fundamentally.
Yeah, I guess that's the challenge. So
right. So I suppose I was going to say, so I know my own story. So I'm in recovery myself, okay, and have been for a little while. And I know that the reasons why I got into recovery was because I didn't want my children to suffer the same way as I did. I had a father who was a gambler, and he was a violent, aggressive, not very kind man. So I didn't want my kids to experience that. And I felt I've brought these 2 children into the world. It's my responsibility to get myself well. And that was it. That's what spurred me to get recovery. So I was at the point, the same as your friend, do I kill myself or do I get recovery? And it was literally, those were my options. And so I thought, I don't want my children to live with that legacy of having a mum that's died. And I wanted to be a good mother. So I went and sought help, and I got treatment through the government. They paid for me to go into rehab for 13 weeks. I was already clean at that point. I'd got clean for a few weeks, but I was really struggling to sustain it, because everybody's your friend when you're clean. Everybody wants to give you things when you're clean, whereas when you are using, they don't want to give you anything. You got to pay for it, whatever way you pay for it. So, but I made that decision. Now, I was really clear that I did not know. If you probably never read my story, but I had a pretty shit childhood, really, but probably one of the worst you'd ever read. But what gave me the resilience to do that, and what doesn't give other people? Do you know what I'm saying? What is that? It's almost like, is there a gene, or is there?
You're quite unique in the whole concept here, because when we talk about hurdles and barriers, the biggest one is inside yourself, to say, yes, I'm going to do this, and do it, and that is the hardest barrier probably, I would say, to overcome. And once you overcome that, yes, there's help, isn't there? But you've got to want it. You've got to want that change in your lifestyle to be able to do it, because it's only you that can carry it through. So you're right. We have a scheme where people found in possession of drugs within our force area are offered the opportunity to go on what we call a drug education program. So that's a half-a-day session with a healthcare professional.
Brilliant.
And not only do they cover drug use, but they'll look at other areas of business as well. And ultimately, they have people will have the opportunity to further their sort of road out of the drug side of the business, and they have that opportunity. So we give that to people, and that's available to anybody found in possession of drugs by the police.
Is that of any age as well?
We have a youth scheme which will take people as young as 10.
Wow.
Wow.
But generally, yeah, it's any age. The only stipulation is that the people want to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they haven't done it before.
Right.
So,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
we give people a chance on the scheme.
Why is it they can't go back? Because they might not have been ready the first time.
Yeah. So we account for that. So we say you cannot go back on this free scheme.
Right. Okay.
Right? But you can go back on another scheme very similar. But
Okay.
you've got to pay.
Right.
I think it's like about £80.
Okay.
So if you really want to do it, you're going to pay the money and do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, if you've got the money.
Yeah, true.
Because then it comes back to what you were saying about resources. It's a bit like saying, I've got to find £100 for a counsellor, which, by the way, you can get some bloody cheap counsellors, my dear. They're not always the best. But you've got to pay. It's an obstacle, isn't it? Is that creating an obstacle by charging?
Yeah, but it's an obstacle that's been presented to us because they've been found in possession of drugs again.
Right,
You know?
okay.
So
they must have some money to possess the drugs, I suppose.
Wow. Depends their position in the line of drug selling and buying.
People who are dependent on drugs don't generally have any money.
No.
It's money, drug. It's changed for drugs almost straight away. But found in possession of drugs, go on the drug education program, get all the contacts and all the healthcare professionals that you need to sort of try and help. In a half day session, if you attend that course, then you don't go down the criminal justice route.
Okay.
Do you still get a criminal record from that, or?
No, as such, you do not get a criminal record because it's not conviction, it's not caution, it's a out of court disposal, but it's treated as a bit lower down. It's recorded lower down. It has its own, without going into too much complicated business about Home Office counting, but it's given a certain outcome that keeps it from being a criminal record as such. So, and that's what we want to do. We don't want people locked up for possession of drugs. You know, it is our intention not to lock people up for possession of drugs, but sometimes that happens. Not very often, but sometimes it does. People are convicted of possession of drugs because they may have come to our notice 10 times in a year. So at some point, there's nothing else we can do out of court but put them in court.
To be a punishment, I suppose. Or just going to keep doing it if you keep saying
it's an accountability, isn't it? That's what it is.
Also, we get people who go to court charged with supply offences and they're found not guilty. Then they will be convicted of a possession offence.
Right.
So they've got the drugs, but the proof is not there that they were intending to supply them.
Yeah.
So it's a possession. So that's a conviction for possession. So that counts as well.
Well, I'm a big fan of all of these TV shows where they go and like Motorway Cops and all of those on Channel 5. I think Channel 5 got about 4 different variants, and whenever they pull someone over at the side of the road and they find drugs on them, and there's this whole discussion about, well, is it possession with intent to supply? Is it supply? Is it all of that? That must be quite hard to kind of prove one way or the other.
Yeah, a drug offence is a bit unique in the fact that if someone's got drugs in their possession, they've committed an offence straight away. So there's an offence there already. So depending on the scale of the offence, then is something that it's law enforcement's responsibility then to try and demonstrate and prove that.
Yeah.
So there's various reasons why it would be a supply offence as opposed to a straightforward possession. So sheer quantity alone, way it's packaged, that sort of thing. And there is other bits of evidence that can be gathered that can suggest either way. Whether it's possession or supply. So yeah, it does. It depends on a number of factors. But stopping and searching people. Police officers stop and search people in order to find them drug dealers. I don't know police officers that stop people just to find possession amounts of drugs on someone, so we can put them on a drug education program. It's not something we want to do. We put 600 odd people through that program every year.
Wow,
so
that's a lot.
Yeah. Pre-COVID, we were struggling. We were struggling with the amount of sessions. Sessions are group sessions, and at one point we were a few months behind. And I didn't agree at the time that you get stopped today, and then in 3 or 4 months' time you get put on a group session to address your drug use. It's just too long. So we were saved really by COVID. In that respect, because the sessions went online, so
people had the opportunity to do it from home.
Yeah. So we were able to do more sessions and
more people
to a larger group, and it worked. So,
and are they doing that now?
default is a group session, live group session.
Yeah.
Because that is where you get the most goodness being done. In circumstances where it's not always practical for someone to attend a group session, then they will run an online session. If it's required, then it will be done over the phone. It depends. When you look at people's access to a computer is not always there, so it's sometimes on a phone. But the guys and girls will try as hard as they can to accommodate everybody, and anybody that's agrees to go onto the drug education program, they will give them the best service they can, and look for every avenue to assist them in either stopping their drug use, or something which is really unique nowadays is giving people advice on how to take drugs safely. Not
it's harm reduction stuff, isn't it? It's so important.
It's not something that for law enforcement to do. It would not be the right thing for police officers to stand up and say, right, if you're going to take drugs, this is what you need to do.
Let's be safe about it.
But I've worked really hard over the last maybe 10 years to have treatment agencies on our side. For many years, the police have been the enemy of treatment agencies, because all we do is lock up their clients. So that's why we've changed massively in Avon Somerset in the way we deal with people for possession. So like I said, I've worked hard to get treatment agencies on board, and I would say that at the moment we are looked at in a positive light by the majority of the treatment agencies in the area.
That really shocks me, because I've been working for many years in the industry, not just drugs and alcohol, mental health and everything. And I don't think I suppose it's just personal thing. I've never ever felt that about the police. Is it because I lived in this neck of the woods rather than up in Bristol? I couldn't tell you. But truthfully, we always saw it as a positive, because actually there's when somebody's getting the police involved in their lives, that's actually an indicator that this is seriously getting out of hand now, and you seriously need to do something about it. And actually, I always think that can be a catalyst to change.
Yeah, it can be a good thing if there's positivity from that interaction with the police. If the police do nothing to address any issues, then
just keeps
it's
on.
frowned
It's
upon.
negative. When I was back on drug squads in the police, for me, my attitude there was our job is to lock drug dealers.
Damn right.
And little consideration was given to people that go to the drug dealers to buy drugs. I'm not saying we didn't care about them.
Like I say, it's the same approach for manufacturers of drugs, as in growers and things like that. It's the same approach as the drug dealer.
Yeah, pretty much so.
But surely the customers that go to the drug dealers is that what you're saying, are as important as the drug dealers in that sense?
Back then, all I was interested in was locking people up who had drugs.
Right.
It didn't matter whether they were drug dealers or drug users. Whatever. That was the attitude at the time. And then now, I know that don't work. So I don't like to use the term war on drugs, but people quote all the time the war on drugs doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It's never worked. You made all these rules in 1971. They still don't work. What's happening? What's happening? And I for one will slip my hand up and say yes, the Misuse of Drugs Act needs to be looked at and rewritten. We've certainly got to that case. A really good indication of how the government are thinking. Although what the government thought 3 years ago doesn't always reflect on what they think now, because the Home Secretaries change so regularly these days.
I was going to say it's been about 6 or 7 of them in the last 3 years.
So they can't really plan for what they're going to do for the future too much. And on top of that, the parties might change as well. And then it's a completely different angle on everything. So. But I forgot what I was talking about.
We were talking about offering treatment to people
and the Misuse of Drugs
under
Act.
the Misuse of Drugs Act, and the impact that was having.
Yeah. So that was it. That was my mindset then. So maybe it's because I just matured, got older, or moved out of that environment. But I know now that kicking off doors and locking up drug dealers is not the way to solve the issues in the UK at the moment.
Makes great TV though.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah,
for Mike to watch, and Dave, my husband.
Yeah, well, I've been followed by camera crews many times. And I'm appear in many different programs, and
Hey.
I've not spotted you yet.
No, and my job on my team. Don't really suggest that I had many brains, but my job on the team was to bash the doors in. That was my job.
Wow.
So every time you see me on the television, I'm bashing in a door.
Big red key, as they call it on TV.
But that was just the way that teams work. One person could write, so they did all the writing.
Is that how it was organised?
Yeah,
right, who can write? Who can use a key?
Sounds like our team.
It does, yeah.
So
did you enjoy doing it? Though?
Yeah, I did. I loved it. I loved that. That was I had some of the best times of my career doing that. That's something I loved, and I felt I was really doing something positive.
And I imagine when you got somebody, that sense of we've achieved what we set out to do must have been phenomenal.
It did, and I didn't care that the next day someone else would come along and take their place and start dealing drugs the same, and we achieved zero. I didn't. It was only as I matured and learned a bit more about what I was doing, I thought, this isn't working, and I moved into a role which was a bit more of a policy type role rather than a out there doing type role, and that sort of changed my my thinking a few years ago. Whereas, this is not the way to do it. This is not. We are not achieving anything. So, towards the end, when I was on a drug squad in Bristol, the detective inspector who's in charge, he had some really good ideas, and one of them was bringing drug treatment agency staff with us on a warrant. When we went to kick off the door, we bring some people with us. We bring other agencies with us, so there was kids there. We could sort of like deal with them. All sorts of things like that. And that's what probably got me thinking that this is the way ahead. And my thoughts are completely the way around. Yes, we are really well equipped in Avon Somerset at the moment to tackle for drug enforcement side of things. We've got some really good staff, good teams working, and they're doing a lot of good work. But equally, we are still really concerned about the other side of it. And
I'm going to be really controversial. So, what do you think about legalizing?
A general legalized drugs?
Well, I suppose dope, all of that kind of stuff. Is there if you look at, say, some of the American model around that, it brings in massive amounts of taxes that goes towards helping people with drug problems. So if you legalized it, would that, I know it's quite controversial, but what's your opinion on that?
So my life is opinion based, so that's what I give my opinion on things. Generally in the Crown Court and generally in written work, but that is most certainly the most common question I get asked in any public arena, and my answer is pretty stock in that the government write the rules, and the police enforce those rules. So that's it. So whatever the government say is the rule, then that's what we look after, that side of it. As far as legalization goes, let's look around the world. Yeah, you're right. Many countries have different elements of what you'd call legalization. In a way, in the UK, police forces are allowed, encouraged to do what they feel is right around that area of drugs within reason. If you look at what we did with cannabis, so with cannabis we introduced cannabis warnings. So if you're found in possession of cannabis on the street, it obviously gets taken off you, but it goes no further, and you're given a warning on the street that it's illegal not to do it again. And that's the end of the matter. So in a way, that's not legalization but decriminalization. So what we say is we still keep those laws. It's still a crime to possess these drugs, but what we're not going to do is prosecute. as far as legalization in general, do you think we should legalize drugs? Then my question is, I still think there's many issues out there that legalization wouldn't solve, but decriminalization is not such a bad thing. One thing to look at about how the government think, which I was going to say earlier, is the Psychoactive Substance Act, which was brought in 2016. The purpose of that act was to stop legal highs being sold in high streets and garages and that sort of thing. That 100% worked.
Yeah.
When the act came in, the legal high white powders, which are stimulants, they disappeared. So they were stimulants like cocaine or amphetamine. They were fairly weak and low quality, but they were legal. People could buy them and use them. So they disappeared overnight. The synthetic cannabinoid, or spice as it's known, that remained, became really, really popular with the homeless community and in prisons.
Yeah.
So that remained. So in time, synthetic cannabinoids were controlled in their own right as a proper controlled drug. Now, when we look at the Psychoactive Substance Act, the offence is there. To possess a drug was not an offence unless it was within a prison. To supply the drug, manufacture it or import it was an offence.
Yeah.
So therefore, possession wasn't an offence. So therefore, if people are found in possession of these substances, it's not a crime at all.
Yeah.
Most common one to compare that with now is nitrous oxide. So nitrous oxide comes in little cylinders, and people generally breathe in the gas, and it makes them a bit high for 30 seconds. Very popular with young people. I walk around any local park will be riddled with these things.
And you find them everywhere, don't you?
So you come across a group of kids, they've all got a cylinder each, and they're breathing it in for a balloon. No crime. You know, the person that's given them the balloons and the cylinders, they're committing a crime. Mm. So in a way, that's the way forward, is not have the drug possession as a crime, but the surrounding aspects of it,
selling of it, manufacturing of it. Yeah, that's where the crime is.
Yeah, so that's probably. And when I saw the Psychoactive Substance Act being released, and believe me, I followed that daily throughout its 18-month period. That pleased me to see that sort of attitude from the government. So, will that happen with all drugs? I doubt it. But I think we'll come to some sort of middle ground at some point where there'll be an element of decriminalisation of some drugs, and not others, and it'll be around about that. The new government strategy, it's sort of suggesting that's a road they want to go down. So we will see it.
I think I changed my views about it. It's a bit like I changed my views around having safe places, like you were talking about safe using, harm reduction. And I used to have really cynical attitude towards having special rooms, using rooms where people could go and safely get a needle and everything was sterilised and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I kind of have changed my mind about that over the years, because I think, well, there is a value in that, and I do see a value in that. I changed my mind about whether or not we should make it legal, and the only reason I feel that there's a level of taking away the criminal side of it is because if we can earn money from this instead of all the drug dealers earning the money from this, then actually there's a value in it. But what do you make legal and what do you make illegal? Yeah. If you say, I think then that's that grey area that you're going to have to always look at. But there is a side where I don't know how it would ever look. You go down to Tesco's and you can buy yourself a bag of whatever you want to buy. No, that's never going to happen. But just I have changed my views slightly around that, because I do feel, I get fed up of walking down the street, whether I'm in Bristol going to do a bit of shopping or in my local village, and there is somebody that is smoking a joint, and that's inflicted on me. I am really anti-drugs, full stop now, for obvious reasons. Yeah. And it really annoys me that people do use drugs and then drive and then do this and then do that. And I think if they treated it they do treat it the same. But if it was treated the same, alcohol is the worst drug that we've got in this country, and probably causes the police more problems than drugs a lot of the time. But we haven't kind of made that a criminal offence, have we?
No, and that's a real political subject. But because I don't know, maybe I'm not right, but there is a massive amount of tax scooped up by the government from tobacco and alcohol. And in a way that's used to fund the NHS. So, if I believe if alcohol and tobacco were brought to this country today, they would be controlled drugs.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I
Definitely.
firmly believe that. The control of drugs, one of the key factors in controlling a new drug is the harm it causes.
Yeah.
So when we look at stats in relation to deaths, drug-related deaths, yes, alcohol and tobacco-related deaths
come
up the highest, because they are prolonged use of those drugs is really harmful. But that's the balance here, isn't it? If we banned alcohol and tobacco,
there'd be riots on the streets.
There would, and petrol would be like £60 a litre. To cover it.
I agree. So is that then a reason why you should perhaps legalise cannabis? Just as an example,
I saw some stats a while back around cannabis. It said to legalise cannabis in the UK would generate £1 billion in tax.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that is going to be. They're going to sit up.
They're going to listen to that.
They're going to sit up and listen to that. I think that's a lot of money. And I thought, what does the NHS cost to run each year? Something like, I don't know, I can't remember now, but I've got 800 billion or something in my head.
It's something wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a tiny, tiny fraction of that.
So I thought, when you're talking £1 billion to the Chancellor, it's like talking of 1 pence to us, maybe. I don't know. It's not a massive amount of money. So, but I did really believe that might be very attractive. But I don't know how attractive that figure would be. But yes, you're right. There would be an opportunity in taxes to bring in money. It happens in other countries. We see a lot of cannabis coming from America to the UK because in America it's legal. Shops sell it. You can buy proper packaging, professional packaged cannabis products, sweets, cannabis sweets, all sorts. We see it all here now. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned treatment agencies because, consumption.
Consumption, that's what they're called. I forgot.
Because I am quite a fan of it. My wife is not, and
is that because the different roles that you have? You're more of a policy role.
Yeah, she's still more of a door kicker.
Door kicker. I like that.
So she's a door kicker still, really. So so her mind's not as much on that. She thinks it's a bit too far. I think it's a way ahead. I also like HAT, heroin assisted treatment.
Yeah.
So give people who are dependent on heroin, give them heroin.
They're doing that now, though.
Yeah, that's working.
But it's quite unique still in Scotland. They did it. They've done it quite a bit, haven't they? Whereas in the UK, it's not been as.
It's really popular in North East Scotland and North East of England.
Yeah, and now it's just coming down to the south because we've recently had a couple of referrals with people that have been on it and are still on it, and we've actually been asked if we can then do a reduction with them while they're in the rehab.
Yeah, I really like that idea. It impacts on other areas of the police and business. So it's not out of step for me to say that most people that use heroin, or most people that are dependent on heroin, commit some form of crime, acquisitive crime, in order to fund that. That's generally how it happens. There are people that use heroin that are able to continue to work. There are people that can fund it through their own means, But so if and this is where other agencies like the NHS and the government need to step up and also assist because it benefits them massively, and the criminal justice system as a whole. Is that if people don't have to go out and commit crime to get money for their drugs, then that impacts massively on the
Oh,
on
completely.
the communities.
Completely.
And,
I agree with you.
and it's got to be a way ahead, and every report you see from an area or a country that uses these systems, drug treatment rooms, the they're positive,
Yeah.
and work really well. Um, and yeah, I've no doubt that the government will come round and these things will happen. But
It's funny though, it's saying again that because everybody thought methadone would do that. Methadone went.
yeah,
But the trouble is, if you're going to give somebody methadone, if you're going to give somebody some form of intervention that's an actual drug, you have to monitor that in a way that is respectful to the drug, but also respectful to the people that are paying for that drug, which is the taxpayer, but also respectful to the individual that it's there for a purpose. With methadone, there's a very clear line as to how it should be given, prescribed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how it's monitored. And I know for myself that some places do not do that. They're just like, oh, give it, he has his 70 ml script. They're not testing them. They're not doing fortnightly checks. No, they're not doing, there's no other interventions. And that I was with a guy once who'd been on a script for 30 years.
Wow.
30 years of a methadone script that you and I are all paying for through the tax. No, and also alongside of that, nobody was monitoring him.
No.
He was lucky if he saw somebody every 3 months, if that.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in treatment agencies, and this is a common subject. The prescribing of methadone and Subutex and treatments like that is a really useful tool for healthcare professionals. But methadone has become a maintenance drug.
Right.
Just give them some methadone, and keep giving it to them, and they'll be okay.
Shuts them up.
And the concept at the beginning was give someone 100 milliliters each day, and then we bring them down 95 next week.
It's a community detox.
That's the idea. That was how it was going to work, but I don't know the stats, but I doubt that's very high up on the list of things that have happened.
Years ago, I was asked if I'd cover somebody's caseload I was doing some consultancy work for one of the drugs agencies, and they said, "Oh, can you come in and cover this whole caseload?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." So I went in, covered the caseload. Well, this person had like a 56 people on their caseload. By the time, literally within 3 weeks, there was something like 10.
Wow.
And I was the hated person in the community because actually you don't turn up for your appointment, you don't get your prescription.
Yeah, of course.
You don't get your prescription. It's not my problem. It's your problem. You've got to be, and you're on a reduction because that's your plan. Your care plan says you're on a reduction. And it's like, I think sometimes it's the attitude of how you approach it as a professional that's important. You can't just, somebody's on a maintenance and still getting 95 mils after 10 years or 2 years or a year. It's down to the professionals. It's not down to the individual. And if they're using on top, forget it.
Yeah.
You test that person. That's what it says. The government guidelines are, the NICE guidelines are that that's how you do it. And that's how it should be followed. If you're not going to do it properly, bye.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a safety scheme.
Of course
you can't take heroin and take methadone on top.
Well, you can, but it's not very good for you.
No, and the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen is a repeat prescription for methadone.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And like you say, but yeah, it's staff-wise, it appears that it's easier just to constantly give people
It's laziness.
these drugs.
That is laziness. It's just a lazy practitioner, in my opinion. Okay, I'm not saying you should stop somebody's drugs necessarily, but actually it's not right just to write them a prescription for 80 mils, 80 mils, 80 mils, 80 mils, and a year later they're still in the same. Actually, the whole point of methadone is a reduction plan. That, it's about harm reduction. It's about how do you manage that person in a helpful way.
But that's the fault of the management of that system, isn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it is. I completely concur.
And it hasn't worked. So in my, I make a lot of decisions at work, and I make a lot of brilliant decisions, but I make some really poor decisions.
As we all do.
Yeah.
To be fair.
And
speak for yourself, you two.
So I think someone maybe needs to accept that it's not
working.
this is not working as a something that we want to employ in the UK, full time, widespread. So yeah, we have our other options, certainly, and assisted treatment, consumption rooms, things that will contribute massively to the lives of communities, and also to reduce costs in the NHS and potentially tax everybody.
Yeah. I mean, we've got clients that are constantly, ketamine is a horrendous drug, and young people do not see the long-term consequences. We've got people in their 20s that have to go to hospital 2-3 times a week. Their kidneys are failing. They're on like 30 operations down the line. You could go on and on. It's awful, but I think the next question I was going to say is there's a charity, we go to schools and do school talks around addiction, risks of drugs, risks of alcohol, the impact it has on your mental health, long-term risks. And I'm really amazed about the amount of schools that don't take up that opportunity. You get real live, and they just don't. We actually have to fight for them to come and
we get funding to go and
do that.
To go and do it,
and they just don't take it up. And you think, we all know, just like your program, education
so important.
all the time. And the younger you get them, repeat that education again. You keep doing it 2 or 3 times throughout their life. The chances are you're going to lower those people taking drugs.
Yeah, most certainly.
Just picking up on the community and the education point, can you talk about what you did at Glastonbury Festival and the other festivals that you've done?
Ooh.
So probably best to talk about NAS.
They had a lot of problems, didn't they, bless them?
Which is where we have the biggest input and impact on that event. So NAS is a relatively small event. I think the capacity is something like 30,000 people. It's held at the Bath and West Showground.
Yeah.
It's designed for younger people, isn't it?
Yeah, I recall the sort of age group, something like 18 to 25.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember I went the first time it opened down there.
Okay.
Yeah, took Will
many years ago.
Yeah, it was.
Younger people are allowed to go as long as
they've got an adult. That's correct.
18.
Yeah. Which can cause its problems in its own right.
Yeah. So that festival, we provide what's known as back of house testing.
Yeah.
So we have a testing facility, and we collect all the drugs placed into amnesty bins or seized by security during searches on gates. And then we take all those drugs. I have a team of drug testers. They go through, catalogue everything and test everything. And the main reason there is to identify substances of concern. So we're looking for things like ecstasy tablets that don't contain MDMA crystal. We're looking for other crystals that aren't what they're important to be. And anything really that's a bit odd or potentially harmful.
Yeah.
So we then feed that back to the organisers where we find substances of concern, and they publicise it around the site. I think there was one particular tablet that a young lady had taken, an ecstasy tablet, and there was a fair bit of harm. Was it in the hospital or being taken to hospital and ambulance? And the organisers put out a bulletin about that type of tablet, and we actually received some of it to test them, so we were able to, be able to give an idea what was in the tablet, what may have been in the tablet. So that's the sort of thing we identified. Like I said, a number of crystals that weren't what they were supposed to be, potentially harmful. So so that's the sort of service we provide at NAS, on top of advising officers in relation to drug offences when they arrest drug users on site, that sort of thing. So we have a similar setup at Glastonbury, although the actual drug testing is not done by us. Glastonbury bring in an outside company, private company, to do the drug testing. So, but
is that because they're cheaper?
Yeah, do you know what? They probably are, because the rates for a police officer, a 24-hour police officer, is they are set. You know? So yeah, for for us to run the service at Glastonbury would cost them way more than
Yeah,
it would cost for them to bring in a private company. Although the private company that come in have been doing it for years, so you know that's what they do. I know the staff there really well.
So is it? Would you say? I mean, in my opinion, I have never seen so many ketamine users in the whole of my career. You know, the whole of my
Yeah.
life. I mean, even when I was a user, the ketamine didn't even exist. You only
No.
gave that to horses.
No, ketamine's been a popular drug within the NHS for many years. So if you'd ever been to hospital and had anaesthetic, general anaesthetic,
Yeah.
you're likely to
Yeah.
be given ketamine.
Yeah.
You know? So we first saw ketamine abused around about 2014, I'd say.
Yeah.
It was
It's
one
quite
of
new.
it was one of the first drugs. In fact, it was probably the second drug to be controlled under the new type of legal highs.
Yeah.
It was a legal high. So I think methadone got controlled first, and then ketamine. So from then on, it has become quite a popular drug amongst young people, and I would say that it is now its most popular. It went up a bit and then it dropped down, but now it's back up
Come
again.
back
It's
up
most
again.
popular. Apart from cannabis
That's
and MDMA, NASC, ketamine was the most
the
common.
next one up.
Wow.
But you know, people don't realise the impact that has on your body.
I think they do now.
Yeah,
Maybe in the
some
early days.
do, some do. I don't think they all realise the impact until they speak to somebody who tells them what happens to them. But also
Comes
that,
back to the education piece,
yeah,
really.
yeah. But it's like people that use cannabis. You know, if you've got a disposition to a mental illness of any kind, even if it's just mild depression, smoking cannabis, particularly young men, because it's been facts are there that actually the chances are it can impede on your mental health so dramatically that it can have lifelong impact.
Yeah, I don't fall out with that. You know, cannabis is not just a bit of weed, like people say.
Yeah,
it's not a gateway drug to other use either.
no, I
you know,
agree.
people choose nowadays what they want to take. What drugs are suitable for what they need. You know, most people who take drugs are taking them to have a good time because they generally do.
Yeah.
You know?
Or block out what they're not feeling.
Yeah. So to have a good time, to forget,
Yeah,
or because they've got pain. You know?
yeah.
So yeah, that's that's why people take the drugs.
How does that then fit with, like you saying, pain management in that sense? So, how does it fit around people that go to their GP, get a prescription, and then become addicted to whatever that doctor's given them, and then that becomes that they're buying it on the streets, and then they're buying it on the internet, and where does the kind of the law sit with that? Because
Yeah, I mean, in theory, someone would never become addicted to a drug when it's prescribed to them by a doctor. In theory,
bullshit.
Yeah. You know, and I don't think you'll get anybody from the NHS admitting that happens. But you were right; it probably does happen.
They did a paper ages ago, though, didn't they, on benzos? Did you read that paper that they did about people not? And then they recognised this years and years ago. This might have been before your time, before you got into policies, but they did this thing that they identified that people, for example, who was on a diazepam for anxiety, that actually they might have been on that medication for 15 years because nobody's bothered to monitor it. Similar to methadone, exactly. And that actually the come down from that is as bad, if not worse, than coming off heroin.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm a really big fan. Probably the wrong word. I'm really interested in benzodiazepines. I'm really interested.
Oh, right, okay.
And I do a lot. I collect a lot of data in relation to them. But yeah, I know what you're saying. If you're on even if you're on 10 milligrams of diazepam a day for 20 years, you are dependent.
Yeah.
And to stop would be hard. The issue in relation to that subject, I think the issue with benzodiazepines is not what the doctors are giving them, because the doctors generally probably don't give them enough. They want more, so people take more, and they're easily and widely available on the internet. The dark web is riddled with benzos. So is it locally, and the sad thing about benzodiazepines is that the world is awash with blue tablets that contain nothing, and
Right.
I remember a few years back, my wife had this prisoner, a drug dealer, and he was found with something like 5,000 diazepam tablets.
Wow.
And these tablets were, in an interview, he said, I can take 100 a day. And we're like, it's not possible. That is a quantity to kill someone.
Right.
Almost that minute.
Mm.
But these tablets were such poor quality that it was a fact, and so then straight away it becomes like a clear-cut drug dealer based on the amount that they're taking and the quality of the tablets. They're not. But that's something that's really, really dangerous. And this is something I bang home to as much people as would listen when it happens, is that the worst period of time for any drug is when the purity drops really low, because then it's got to come back up at some point, And we had this issue with heroin during the lockdowns. So during the lockdowns, the quality of heroin dropped from a sort of like a 5-year stability period of being around about 50% pure, down to 15 or 20%.
Gosh. Okay.
So people were having to take more heroin to achieve the same,
get the high.
Yeah, the same as had before. So whilst that's not a major issue because they just buy more heroin, but the issue comes then is when they come across or it's back at 50%, and then we're stepping into overdose territory there, clearly. So during the lockdown periods, I monitored purity of heroins really, really closely, and I was constantly updating treatment agencies around this so they could put it out to their people.
Yeah.
And the transition back, we're not back to where we were before yet, but I think we've sort of like settled around 40%, and I think it's going to stay that way. But we were able to make that transition back to where it was normally quite gentle and keep people updated. So, I feel that we did a really positive thing in relation to that.
Do you carry, because there was this thing quite recently about local police, not necessarily to Avon and Somerset, carrying a naloxone?
Avon and Somerset do not issue naloxone to their staff as a rule. There are areas of Avon and Somerset, for example, Somerset, south Somerset, as opposed to North Somerset, Western Supermare. So we call it East and West Somerset.
Yeah. Don't tell me I get confused anyway.
I can never remember. I think so. West Somerset is by the sea, and East Somerset is
by the town.
Yeovil. So,
how long have you lived there again?
maybe the M5's a border. I've never actually.
I have no idea. I'm still lost already. So
anyway, sorry.
So down in Somerset, some officers are carrying naloxone or
nasal or injection.
Yeah, the nasal spray.
Yeah.
Voluntarily.
Yeah.
It's not anywhere else in the force area.
Sorry, what does this stuff do? Because I don't know.
Well, if you've taken too much heroin and you overdose, then you can inject someone or nasal spray them with naloxone, and it sort of like dissolves the heroin inside you. So it reverses the effect. So almost instantly after an injection, in the right place. People will come back round.
Okay.
They'll be quite angry.
Yeah, of course.
Because they've got no heroin inside them.
No.
So they'll be quite angry. So it's not just a matter of inject them and then send them on the way. They still have to go to hospitals.
Of course.
But yeah, it's a magical thing. So my team and I have a drug tester on my team. So my drug tester and all members of my team have naloxone for our own protection and the protection of each other, because we are handling drugs all the time. And I'll tell you why we got that. It's because of about 4 or 5 years ago, we saw an emergence of fentanyl in the UK, which was particularly strong synthetic opioid, and although reports weren't 100% correct, but people were potentially dying from just breathing in the dust.
Yeah.
So there was an element of uncertainty. But when you're looking at something that's 100, 500,000 times stronger than heroin,
you have
to be that mindful. So we changed our PPE sort of routine for drug testing, and I got all my team trained up on naloxone. So I'm a big fan. I'd rather every cop in Somerset.
Yeah.
But there's
well, we can't get
political issues.
Yeah, we struggle to get it as in a rehab, for the clients when they leave, when they're going back to where they came from. And
what's the reason for that then?
I have no idea. The
cost, is it training?
It's criminal, really, because if you're sending somebody back to where they came from, and there might be a risk, because we do a risk assessment when somebody leaves, and they're not saying they're going to use, but you got an inkling that they may. And a lot of people do is they leave rehab, use, even if it's just for a week, and then get back on the program. That's kind of a lot of what people do. Yeah. That's when they're at their highest risk of dying, because, like you were saying about strengths, they think, I can go back and I can still use that same amount as I did before I went into rehab, and before you know it, they're dead on the street. And that's the sad thing about it. So for us to be refused that drug from our GPs, who are these people are patients there, it seems crazy to do that, because you're at risk of somebody losing their lives. Some of the London local authorities actually send them to us. We have to go, which is once again crazy as well, because they have to do that.
Yeah, I know this, like the prison thing. I think they stopped releasing people on a Friday
for that reason. Yeah,
because all weekend they've got nowhere to go if they if they're gonna go back.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And if people, I know that, I'm not sure we do it in Avon Somerset just yet, but I know that in Devon and Cornwall, they have a leaving pack. So when you leave custody, you've been dealt with crimes or whatever, in interview or whatever. If you're an intravenous drug user, then they provide you with a pack and needles and clean stuff and like that.
Oh, really? So
because you wouldn't.
Slowing the risk.
If someone came into custody and searched out needles and stuff like it, would go in the bin. If they come in foil or spoons or whatever, they would go in the bin. And because there'd always be contained traces of some drug, and you couldn't really give someone back something that was traced of drugs. So but we give them new stuff. So that seems to work well down there.
Have you ever been stopped at the airport? This is really going silly now. At the airport and been tested for drugs, and they've tried to pull you over, even though they may know what you do for it.
Yeah. I used to have this rucksack that I used to use for work, going away, everything. But I don't do that anymore. I have a separate rucksack for work. That's my work rucksack. But the overriding factor here is that when you go through security in an airport, they're not interested in drugs, they're interested in explosives. So they're interested in if you're going to blow the plane up or not whether you're going to take drugs on the plane. So,
or they're less interested in whether you're going to take drugs.
I know. They use
bloody tested. They always get that swab thing out, whatever the circumstances, and just check my kit. It's really annoying.
Well, we use a similar equipment to what they use for swabbing for drugs. So it's all a matter of just the software that's on there. Our machine hasn't got explosives on it. Their machine probably hasn't got drugs on it. So I've never been stopped. But my rucksack used to stink of cannabis all the time anyway.
Well, one of our deputy, she's a manager now. The manager at the rehab, somebody brought something in with them. It was in the corner of their pocket, and it was like, oh shit, I've got this on me. And the rigmarole of taking it down to the police station and expecting you guys to dispose of it is crazy, because we know the workload that puts on you. So generally, we dispose of it in an appropriate manner ourselves. Anyway, Victoria forgot it was in a bag, the zippy bit at the back. and she was on her way on holiday. And I said to her, "You did dispose of those drugs?" "Oh, God," she goes like that, and quickly got rid of them. But she could have got herself in a bit of a pickle there.
Could have done.
A
Well,
wrap
I'm
of
really
heroin.
conscious of time
Yeah, I
because
understand.
we've been chatting for over an hour. It's probably our longest podcast so far, but it's been really
Yeah, I've loved it.
interesting.
I did. I had a guy down from Sheffield who was a criminology professor up there, and he came down to do some work around out of court disposals, like our drug education program sort of thing. And I actually arranged something like 10 interviews with him with various ranks and people that ran the force ladder. And most people did like an hour with him, and I did like 3 hours with him. So
I want you to come back though.
Yeah, I'd love you to come
Yeah, I'd
back,
love you to come back because I've really, really enjoyed talking to you.
yeah,
It's
I could
really nice.
do that.
It's been really good. Well, hopefully it's been good for you. I think it's been really interesting. So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
That's what I do, and I talk about drugs. So I'm more than happy to talk about drugs, and I'm more than happy to talk about what I think about other aspects, not just drug dealers.
Yeah.
You know, the other side, and I enjoy that. I enjoy those subjects just as much as I do talking about actual drugs themselves. So,
Also, you know, you're clearly really passionate as well about the whole policy side of it,
yeah,
which I think is so important because you know you are right. You've kind of experienced everything from the whole, you know, being the key and kicking doors down to now looking at the policy of, you know, where are we going to go with this? And I think that's just really interesting.
I also find it's almost you've protected the country through being in the forces,
yeah,
and now you're trying to protect the country through policy
Drugs.
making
Yeah.
and various other things. And I think that and to protect our young people, and I think that's a really important role that very often people frown about the police a lot, whereas I love them. Do you know what I'm saying? They're brilliant. As long as you let them know exactly when you need help the right way, they'll be there, if you see what I'm saying. And I just think sometimes people don't realize how important your tasks are and important your jobs are. And I know they get in the way of people's drug use and criminology and all of that, but actually you're still a protector of this country.
yeah,
Whether you're out walking on the streets or not, it doesn't matter. You're still in the background doing the work. And I think
you're
that's
right.
really
Yeah.
important. And I'm grateful to have that. You know, really
Appreciate that.
grateful for that.
Wonderful. Thanks very
Right.
much. We'll end it there.
Yeah. Thanks.